My mother-in-law spent 3 years trying to convince her son that I was a gold digger who trapped him into marriage. She had no idea that I was the one who insisted on a prenup, not to protect myself from her son, but to protect my $89 million trust fund from ever becoming a weapon in her hands. And now, in a lawyer's office on the 37th floor of a Manhattan high-rise, she was about to discover exactly who she'd been trying to destroy. My name is Eliza Harrington Caldwell. I'm 29 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been married to the love of my life, Jonathan Caldwell. I've also been the target of a relentless campaign of humiliation, manipulation, and cruelty orchestrated by his mother, Victoria Caldwell, a woman who believes that her son deserves royalty and got stuck with what she calls the help. Victoria never missed an opportunity to remind me of my place. At family dinners, she'd comment on how I held my fork. At holidays, she'd buy everyone designer gifts and hand me a grocery store candle with the price tag still attached. At her annual garden party, she'd introduce me to her friends as Jonathan's little wife. She works in food service, isn't that quaint? She wasn't entirely wrong. I did work in food service, as a waitress at a small diner in Brooklyn, 3 days a week. What Victoria didn't know was why I worked there, or what I did the rest of the time, or who my family actually was. She never asked. She only assumed. And assumptions, as she was about to learn, can be extraordinarily expensive. I met Jonathan at that diner 4 years ago. He came in on a Tuesday afternoon, soaking wet from the rain, and ordered a cup of coffee and a slice of pie. He was polite to me, genuinely polite, not the performative politeness of someone who sees waitstaff as beneath them. He asked my name. He asked about my day. He left a 50% tip and came back the next day. And the next day. And the next. By the end of the month, he'd asked me out. By the end of the year, he'd proposed. And through all of it, every date, every conversation, every moment of falling in love, he never once asked about my family's money. Because he didn't know it existed. I'd introduced myself as Eliza Harper, using my mother's maiden name. I lived in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and worked 3 shifts a week at a diner that paid $15 an hour plus tips. To Jonathan, I was exactly what I appeared to be, a woman working her way through life with nothing but her own 2 hands. He fell in love with that woman. And that's exactly what I'd wanted. You see, my real name is Eliza Harrington. My father, William Harrington, founded Harrington Industries, a manufacturing conglomerate that supplies components to every major tech company in North America. When he passed away 6 years ago, he left the company to a board of directors, a charitable foundation in his name, and a trust fund in mine worth $89 million. I'd spent my early 20s watching wealthy men pursue me for my last name, watching friends betray me for access to my connections, watching people smile to my face while calculating my net worth behind my eyes. By the time I was 25, I was exhausted by the performance of it all. So I'd stepped away. I'd moved to Brooklyn, taken a job at a diner owned by my late mother's best friend, and started living the anonymous life I'd always craved. I volunteered at a youth literacy program. I took art classes at a community center. I made friends who liked me for my personality, not my portfolio. And then I met Jonathan, and I decided to find out if real love was possible, love based on who I was, not what I had. I told him the truth 3 months into our engagement. I'd been terrified, certain that knowing about the money would change everything, would make him look at me differently, would poison what we had. Instead, he'd laughed. I fell in love with a waitress who argues about books and burns toast and cries at dog commercials, he'd said. I don't care if you're secretly a billionaire. I just care that you're you. Then he'd paused. But maybe don't tell my mother just yet. She's a lot. And I'd rather she didn't have any excuse to pretend she approved of you all along. I'd agreed. It was our secret, one we kept for 3 years while Victoria Caldwell made my life a living hell. The divorce ambush came on a Wednesday afternoon. Victoria had called, insisting I meet her for lunch at a restaurant in Midtown. Just the 2 of us, she'd said sweetly. It's time we got to know each other better. I should have known it was a trap. Victoria had never wanted to get to know me better. Victoria wanted me gone. When I arrived at the restaurant, she wasn't alone. Seated beside her was a man in an expensive suit with a leather briefcase and the cold eyes of someone who charged $800 an hour. Across from them was Jonathan's sister, Penelope, looking uncomfortable but resolute. Sit down, Eliza, Victoria commanded. We need to discuss your marriage. Where's Jonathan? Jonathan doesn't need to be here for this. This is a conversation between women. She smiled, the kind of smile that preceded a knife between the ribs. This is Gregory Palmer, one of the finest divorce attorneys in New York. And these, she slid a folder across the table, are your divorce papers. I didn't touch the folder. I'm not signing anything, Victoria. You will if you know what's good for you. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I've tolerated you for 3 years because Jonathan was infatuated. But infatuation fades, and reality sets in. You're a waitress. A nobody. You contribute nothing to this family except embarrassment. I love your son. And he loves me. Love. She laughed bitterly. Love doesn't pay for the lifestyle my son deserves. Love doesn't give me grandchildren worthy of the Caldwell name. Love doesn't change the fact that you are fundamentally beneath us. Victoria, sign the papers, or I'll destroy you. Her voice went ice cold. I have connections you can't imagine. I can make sure you never work in the city again. I can make sure everyone knows you trapped my son into marriage. I can make your life so miserable you'll wish you'd never heard the Caldwell name. Gregory Palmer cleared his throat. Mrs. Caldwell has retained my services to ensure this separation proceeds efficiently. Given that you brought no assets to the marriage and your prenuptial agreement clearly states, you've seen the prenup? I interrupted. I've reviewed the summary Mrs. Caldwell provided. I almost smiled. Of course she'd only given him a summary. The full document told a very different story. I'd like my own attorney present before I sign anything, I said calmly. You can't afford an attorney, Victoria snapped. You can barely afford your rent. Nonetheless, I'd like representation. I'm sure Mr. Palmer would agree that's my legal right. Gregory Palmer, to his credit, looked mildly uncomfortable. She's not wrong, Mrs. Caldwell. Proceeding without opposing counsel could create issues down the line. Victoria's jaw tightened. Fine. 1 week. But if you think dragging this out will change anything, you're even stupider than I thought. I stood, leaving the divorce papers untouched on the table. 1 week, I agreed. I'll have my attorney contact Mr. Palmer to arrange a meeting. As I walked out, I heard Victoria mutter to Penelope, she's probably going to find some legal aid lawyer. This will be over before it begins. I smiled all the way to the elevator. That evening, I told Jonathan everything. He was furious, not at me, but at his mother. He wanted to confront her immediately, to cut her off entirely, to make clear that her behavior was unacceptable. Let me handle this, I said, taking his hands. Your mother has spent 3 years treating me like dirt because she thinks I'm powerless. She's never going to respect me until she understands exactly who she's dealing with. What are you planning? A meeting? With lawyers. The full prenuptial agreement. And every document proving exactly who I am and what I'm worth. Jonathan grinned, the same grin he'd had when he first asked me out at the diner. Can I at least be there to watch? I'm counting on it. The next morning, I called Harrison Wright, the senior partner at Wright, Morrison and Associates, the law firm that had handled my family's affairs for 30 years. Harrison had known me since I was a child. He'd managed my father's estate, structured my trust fund, and personally drafted the prenuptial agreement Victoria was now trying to use against me. Eliza. His voice warmed immediately when his assistant put me through. It's been too long. How's married life treating you? That's actually why I'm calling. I need your help with something. I explained the situation. When I finished, Harrison was quiet for a long moment. So your mother-in-law hired a divorce attorney without reading the actual prenup, doesn't know who you really are, and is trying to force you out of the marriage under threat of destruction? That's the summary, yes. Eliza, I've been practicing law for 42 years. This might be the most satisfying meeting I'll ever attend. I could hear the smile in his voice. Set it up. I'll clear my schedule. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at Gregory Palmer's office, a sleek corner suite in a high-rise overlooking Central Park. Victoria had chosen the venue deliberately, I suspected. She wanted me to feel small and out of place amid the mahogany furniture and original artwork. She was already seated when Jonathan and I arrived, flanked by Penelope and Gregory Palmer. She looked at my simple blouse and slacks with undisguised contempt. No attorney, she asked sweetly. I thought you were going to find representation. He's parking the car, I said, taking a seat beside Jonathan. He should be up shortly. Victoria rolled her eyes. Let's get started. The sooner we conclude this, the sooner we can all move on with our lives. She shot a meaningful look at Jonathan. I've already started a list of appropriate young women for you to meet, darling. The Worthington girl just returned from finishing school in Switzerland. I'm not divorcing my wife, mother. You will once you understand. The door opened, and Harrison Wright walked in. He was 73 years old, silver-haired, and dressed in a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He carried a leather briefcase that had been a gift from a former Secretary of State, and he moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had won arguments against the best legal minds in the country. Gregory Palmer recognized him immediately. His face went pale. Harrison Wright, he breathed. I didn't realize you were. I mean, I've followed your career for years. The Mercer case. The Thornton acquisition. You're a legend. You're too kind. Harrison shook his hand briefly, then took the seat beside me. I'm here representing Mrs. Eliza Harrington Caldwell. Shall we begin? Victoria's eyes narrowed. Harrington Caldwell? Her name is Eliza Caldwell. Harper before that. Harper was her mother's maiden name, which she used for personal reasons during a period of privacy. Harrison opened his briefcase and began removing documents. Her legal name, as it appears on the marriage certificate and all other official documents, is Eliza Marie Harrington Caldwell. Harrington, Victoria repeated slowly. The name was clearly ringing a distant bell. Why does that? Perhaps we should review the prenuptial agreement, Harrison interrupted smoothly. I understand there's been some confusion about its terms. He slid a thick document across the table, the full prenup, not the summary Victoria had provided to Gregory. Mrs. Caldwell, I understand you've been operating under the assumption that this agreement protects your son's assets in the event of divorce. That is, not accurate. Gregory Palmer was already reading, his frown deepening with each page. This prenup, this protects the wife's assets. All assets brought to the marriage by Eliza Harrington remain her sole property. In the event of divorce, Jonathan Caldwell waives all claims to. He looked up. This says she has a trust fund. Correct. Harrison produced another document. The Harrington Family Trust, established by the late William Harrington of Harrington Industries, with Eliza as sole beneficiary. Current value, $89.3 million, as of last quarter's statement. The silence in the room was absolute. Victoria's face had gone completely white. That's not, she's a waitress. She works at a diner. She drives a Honda. She works at a diner owned by a family friend because she enjoys the work and values living a normal life, Harrison corrected. She drives a Honda because she finds flashy displays of wealth distasteful. And she never told you about her inheritance because, he glanced at me, she wanted to know if your son would love her for herself, not her money. Jonathan squeezed my hand under the table. Additionally, Harrison continued, I should note that Harrington Industries, the company founded by Eliza's late father, supplies manufacturing components to several companies in which the Caldwell family holds significant investments. Your husband's portfolio, Mrs. Caldwell, includes approximately $2.4 million in stocks that depend directly on Harrington Industries' continued operation. He let that sink in. To summarize, your daughter-in-law is worth more than your entire family combined. Your son signed a prenup protecting her assets, not his. And you've spent 3 years publicly humiliating the sole heir to a company that substantially impacts your financial well-being. Harrison closed his briefcase with a soft click. Did you not know who she was? Victoria looked like she might actually faint. Penelope had pressed herself back into her chair as if trying to disappear. Gregory Palmer was studying the ceiling with intense focus, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. This is? Victoria's voice came out as a croak. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked. I spoke for the first time since Harrison had entered. In 3 years, you never once asked about my family, my background, my life before Jonathan. You decided I was a gold digger the moment we met, and nothing I did could change your mind. If I had known. What? You would have treated me like a human being? I shook my head. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. I wanted to see who you really were, and you showed me. Every snide comment. Every grocery store candle. Every introduction where you called me the help. I stood up. I'm not signing your divorce papers, Victoria. Jonathan and I love each other, and we're going to stay married for a very long time. But things are going to change. What do you mean? I mean that from now on, you treat me with respect. Not because I have money, because I'm your son's wife and I deserve basic human dignity. No more snide comments. No more comparing me to other women. No more attempts to destroy my marriage. And if I don't? I glanced at Harrison, who nodded slightly. Harrington Industries is currently evaluating its supplier relationships with several companies in your husband's portfolio. It would be a shame if those partnerships were to dissolve. Additionally, the Harrington Foundation's annual gala is the most exclusive event on the East Coast social calendar. I believe you've been trying to secure an invitation for years. Victoria's face went from white to red. She'd been begging for an invitation to that gala for as long as anyone could remember. It was the crown jewel of social achievement, and she'd never known that her own daughter-in-law controlled the guest list. That's blackmail, she whispered. That's consequences, I corrected. Something you've clearly never experienced before. Jonathan stood beside me. We're done here, Mother. Eliza is my wife. She's part of this family. And if you can't accept that, then you're the one who's going to be left out in the cold. We walked out together, hand in hand, leaving Victoria Caldwell sitting in stunned silence amid the ruins of her scheming. The aftermath was everything I could have hoped for. Victoria spent 2 weeks calling Jonathan, trying to explain, apologize, and negotiate in equal measure. He let most of the calls go to voicemail. When he did answer, he was polite but firm, respect Eliza, or don't be part of our lives. Penelope actually came around first. She showed up at our apartment with flowers and a genuine apology. I should have stood up to her, she admitted. I knew what she was doing was wrong. It was easier to go along. It usually is, I agreed. But easier isn't always right. We've been slowly rebuilding a relationship. She's not perfect, but she's trying, and that's more than I expected. Victoria took longer. It was 3 months before she could bring herself to have a civil conversation with me, and 6 months before anything resembling warmth entered her voice. But the snide comments stopped. The comparison stopped. The grocery store candles were replaced with thoughtful gifts that showed she actually paid attention to my interests. I don't think she'll ever truly like me. But she respects me now, and that's all I ever really wanted. Last month, I attended the Harrington Foundation Gala with Jonathan by my side. It was my first public appearance as Eliza Harrington since I stepped away from that world 8 years ago. Victoria was there too, finally, after years of trying. She walked through the door, saw the banner with my family's name, saw me standing beside the foundation's board of directors, and nearly dropped her champagne glass. I smiled and waved her over. "Welcome to our gala, Victoria. I hope you enjoy yourself." The look on her face was worth 3 years of grocery store candles. I still work at the diner 3 days a week. I still drive my Honda. I still live the quiet, anonymous life I chose for myself all those years ago. But now, when Victoria Caldwell introduces me at family events, she doesn't call me the help anymore. She calls me our Eliza, of the Harringtons. And I smile every time, because I know the truth. She didn't start respecting me because of my last name or my trust fund. She started respecting me because I refused to be destroyed. My mother-in-law thought I was too poor to deserve her son. She tried to force me out with divorce papers and threats. The Prenup lawyer found an $89 million trust fund she never knew existed. And now she brags about me at every party she attends. Funny how money changes people's opinions. But it never changed mine. And that's the only thing that matters.